My name is Taka Tanaka. Dr. Chang was my advisor here at UCR. And yeah, so I finished my doctorate here in ethnic studies, and it's really, so that's kind of one hat that I wear. I'm also a professor at El Camino College in Torrance. But today I wanted to talk a little bit about sort of this understanding of what we speak on in terms of like space, place, and community, and thinking about the Harada House as this sort of Asian American sort of project, but also thinking about this connection that I made with the Korean American actually community, even though we're thinking about these disparate sort of discourses in terms of like Japanese American history and Korean American history, and then obviously the past there too. So let's see here. So when we talk about space and place, I know some of us are maybe not within these sort of traditional academic spaces. When we're talking about space, we're talking about location, right? So we're talking about function of this particular location, the geography, the physical space, right? As opposed to a place, right? Where actually there are feelings and connections and identities and meaning that is attached to our understanding of sort of place, right, as opposed to just a physical location. And one of the examples that I want to talk about is Riverside, right? Here as a space, it's located in Southern California. We're about 50 miles southeast of Los Angeles, chartered in 1907, the elevation, 927 feet. Like these are kind of situations that we think of when we talk about space, right? But when we talk about Riverside as a place, right, one of the largest things that we can think about is this understanding of Pachapa Camp, right, what it represents, right, in a larger sense. It's shaped and influenced by many cultures, right? The citrus industry, right, that was sort of developed in this particular region, the Festival of Lights, the Tamale Festival, right, these cultural gathering spaces, the Mission Inn, right, and also maybe this place like UCR, right, in terms of thinking about higher education. But one of the things that we also want to think about, and this ties into, is what we say Asian American culture, right? Maybe which is maybe kind of like a more recent or contemporary term, but for us to think about a place like Riverside, California as an Asian American cultural place is something that I think with the help of Dr. Chang's discovery of Pachapa Camp has really sort of opened up our eyes to thinking about what Asian American culture is, particularly in Southern California when we have Los Angeles, we have even Orange County as like these larger sort of Asian American spaces. Where does sort of Riverside fit into that, right? And so Pachapa Camp is one particular dynamic that has been spoken about at length in these places, right? And also with the Harada House. And the Harada House, for those of you who are not familiar, is a home that's located on Lemon Street, down in downtown Riverside, 3356 Lemon Street. And it was owned by a Japanese American family, and they had to sort of circumvent the alien land laws of 1913 by purchasing property that was deemed unpurchasable by aliens or Asians. But what ended up happening was the Haradas ended up purchasing the home in their children's names who were American born. And that was a way for them to circumvent this particularly sort of racist law that was put into place in the early 1900s. Well, how does this kind of relate, right? What is this sort of connection that are we seeing between this sort of Korean American history and this sort of like Japanese American history, right? Dr. Chang spoke earlier about Hemet Valley, right, being this sort of like monumental sort of case that basically the United States sort of deemed Koreans as their own sort of national sort of citizens as opposed to being Japanese subjects, right? But what I ended up finding through my research is that place, community, and through the archive, we can actually find these larger connections between the two communities. And when we talk about community, a community in short, right, is any group of people who come together and present themselves as such, and community archive is a product of their attempts to document the history of their commonality. So we have the Pachapa campsite, the Harada House, and the Dosan Anchangho Museum are not just like historical sites, but they're like resources that provide an expansion, like a significance of understanding of a place, right? Of transforming that into a space, right? And enlightening us about its rich cultural and communal history. So we think about cultural memory, right? And beyond this one sort of singular narrative that we're familiar with. The Koreans did this, the Chinese did this, right? The Japanese did this. And so what I ended up delving into was to sort of like kind of interrogate that particular history by looking at not just one singular narrative, but multiple sort of narratives that kind of fall into that. And with that, we see the collection at the Harada Family Archive Collection in the Museum of Riverside, and also thinking about these projects that were essential to preserving the history, right, in the Asian American community in Riverside. And so I think these sort of communal sort of projects in the communal archive have really sort of reshaped and redefined spaces as a place, right? And so one of the other sort of elements that sort of brought everything together was a guest speaker that we actually brought in when we had to present in August by the name of Meiko Inaba, who kind of bridged the gap because Meiko was actually friends, who's a Japanese American who was incarcerated during World War II, was actually friends with Catherine Kim, right? And that those Kim papers were actually donated to the University of California, Riverside, right? So you have this like great like archival collection that was actually curated by Catherine Kim, who gave this collection to basically Mako for her to sort of donate to the University of California, Riverside. So if it wasn't for this sort of interethnic sort of community sort of connection that we see more in like a contemporary sense, I would have never been able to sort of do my own research or to find this sort of connection, not only with the different communities here in Riverside, but also doing my own research and sort of delving into the archive and finding out a little bit more about the Harada House for my dissertation. So we want to think about Riverside as a place through the archive that helps establish an understanding of the significance of the empirical and historical evidence through the community archive. And this sort of Kim family papers collection that's housed here at UCR was very much sort of important to us understanding Riverside as an Asian American space and place that we live in today. And so how am I sort of tying this all together with education and ethnic studies and social justice? I know that's kind of like the larger theme, right, in terms of like pedagogy, et cetera. And really thinking about how doing a study like this and sort of presenting it to your students, kind of in the same way that Carol was doing earlier, was thinking about how it impacts the student, right? We also talk about social justice and thinking about understanding that ethnic studies curriculum is part of this sort of initiative of social justice, of presenting this curriculum, right? And thinking about maybe adding these questions of equity, right? And whose story are we really trying to tell, right? Are we only telling the story of the sort of, you know, the colonizer, right? The folks that have sort of established our own sort of country without realizing that there were other communities that were affected by, say, colonization or slavery and whatnot, right? And so when we think about these particular contexts, right, in terms of like the textbooks, right, how do we highlight these stories that aren't being told? And I think that's something that we all strive for in these sort of ethnic study spaces, but really thinking about how we have to, as educators, right, really think about sort of changing the curriculum, right? So thinking about who's this curriculum for, and thinking about history in this sort of broader sense, right? You know, I think there's a historical significance between Meiko Inaba's contributions and thinking about the 1800s, not just thinking about like some things that happened in the 1800s or even in the 1940s, but really thinking about history as this sort of ongoing sort of exercise that we all can kind of reestablish maybe our own sort of place here in American history too, right? And we're all a part of that too, right? I know we have some high school students here joining us too, right? And so thinking about how your place and your is sort of in history is really defined by some of the pioneers at Pachapa, right? At you know, in Riverside, right? By these sort of folks that felt as though this history was important to preserve. Okay. So thinking about also as an educator applying a critical lens and thinking about these issues of power and privilege, right? And thinking about how we need to sort of push against that sort of larger narrative And my last point here is shifting and adjusting the curriculum to address those voices in the community, and thinking about how we can have these larger conversations about changing the discourse of just like not one singular narrative, but also multiple narratives that we can all kind of highlight and really sort of allow people of color, students of color, to really feel like they've that their community has also contributed to the larger U.S. narrative, historical narrative. Anyway, that is my time, so thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Tanaka.
Thank you.
And next speaker is Ken Gutierrez. Gutierrez. How is it pronounced?
Gutierrez.
Gutierrez, I'm sorry. Gutierrez, board president, Civil Rights Institute in Southern California. He'll be talking about Civil Rights Institute, which will host Pachapa Camp exhibition in beginning August through November 2025. Thank you.
All right. I love it when a plan comes together. Ken Gutierrez, president of the Civil Rights Institute of Inland Southern California. Have any of you visited our facility? Yes! I'm glad to hear it. We're relatively new. If you talk to Rose Mays and Lala Acharya, they had a vision some probably 15, 17 years ago. They took a class together on nonprofit management, and they were asked to envision what could be. And they envisioned the Civil Rights Institute. Well, it took us a long time, but we finally pulled that vision together. We created a partnership between Wakeland Housing Development Corporation, the Fair Housing Council of Riverside County, and a new organization, the Civil Rights Institute of Inland Southern California. And we created Mission Heritage Plaza. 71 units of affordable housing, new offices for the Fair Housing Council, and the Civil Rights Institute of Inland Southern California. I'm going to focus just on the Civil Rights Institute. We call ourselves a living enterprise based in history. And you can see our mission and our vision. I just want to highlight the values. Inclusiveness, collaboration, and good trouble. And that probably conjures up images of John Lewis, right? And that's what guides us moving forward. And that's why we're so excited to be a part of this effort, because it's inclusive. And it brings all these groups together. Taka talked about how things tie together. The roots, come together. And that's exactly what we're doing here. Sabrina Gonzalez is our executive director. One of the best things I've ever done is hiring Sabrina. Being part of a board that hired Sabrina to lead us in our first 2 years. We have and I don't know why this slide just shows the executive committee, but we have a board of 15 people that are embedded and committed to the community and are very active. What do we do? Well, if you visit the building on Michigan Avenue behind the Fox Theater and across from the new library, the first thing you see on the sidewalk is a Walk of Fame, where we celebrate leaders in civil rights in our community. And their names are never going away. They're embedded in concrete, in the sidewalk. We just have to keep it clean. We have partnered up with the Riverside African American Historical Society. They helped fund our exhibition center, where we have moving exhibits, and where the Pachapa Camp exhibit will be next spring, as Dr. Chang mentioned. The Bank of America Diversity Center is a large room. It seats maybe 140 people, and it's for the community. I should come over here. It's a place where community groups can come in and can meet. It's a safe place where we can have those tough discussions that nobody wants to have. The Altura Credit Union Media Center is a digital archive. We hope to be a repository, a place where we can archive people's civil rights stories. Those stories are being told and they're being saved, but there's not a single place for them. And we hope to become that place. And that digital archive library, we hope to reside in our facility. We've been open less than 2 years. Our first year, and you see the numbers, we hosted 225 community events, had over 10,000 visitors to our space. For a first year open, that's just, absolutely incredible. 107 exhibition tours, and this is for our Still I Rise exhibit. But we have to keep going. What else? What's next? This year, this spring, we hosted the Working Coachella exhibit. If any of you had a chance to see that, it was a fantastic exhibit featuring the farm workers in the Coachella Valley and showing, I guess, the hope that they give us. These are the people that grow our food. Those of us that had a chance to see that exhibit probably will never eat fruits and vegetables the same way again without thinking of those people, whose hands picked, those vegetables and the hardships that they have had to endure. The exciting part about this exhibit, is that we took it down to the city of Coachella, and it resided there for another 3 months, and it continues to live on. We had a pop-up exhibit of out in the Inland Empire. We had a photographic exhibit that was both at our site and at the Garcia Center in San Bernardino that we called I Am Grateful That Thorns Have Roses, and it celebrated life in San Bernardino. We are the Civil Rights Institute of Inland, Southern California. And the exhibit that we have coming up starting next Thursday night, and I'll invite you all to our reception here very soon, is Homegrown Heroes, where we celebrate our local homegrown heroes. And I will mention this next Thursday night, that all those people in the room will probably shirk when we call them heroes, because they don't look at themselves as heroes. They look at themselves as ordinary individuals who saw an opportunity and acted on it. I have to mention a little bit about the Mellon Grant that Dr. Cheng mentioned. We are so excited to partner with these other organizations and looking forward to hosting the exhibit next spring. And it's really, or next summer, whenever it's going to be. But I think what's really exciting for us is that $50,000 grant, rather than using that, for our operational funds, we're using that to help fund our Disappearing Chinatowns exhibit that would come up in the next, 2026, I believe, is when we're looking at that. We're working now at compiling newspaper articles, inventorying the Chinese Exclusion Act files, preparing for an exhibit. Again, another example of partnerships that are demonstrated in this very room today. Okay, as I wrap up, I want to talk about the Homegrown Heroes exhibit. Next Thursday, 6 o'clock, all of you are invited to a reception to celebrate that exhibit where we advance civil rights in our region by celebrating local people. And one other thing is that we are partnering on a community film screening, Big Fight in Little China. That will be on October 26th. And again, we invite you to come to that to view the film, but also be a part of a discussion that we're going to have after that. And if you want further information, you can see me, but if you really want the good information, contact Sabrina. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Ken, for being so prompt. 10
Yes.
minutes. Thank you so much. Third speaker is Rosalind Segura. She's the president of Save Our Chinatown Committee. And you may not know that Riverside not only has a Chinatown, but also Koreatown and Japanese American community and Filipino American labor camps. So it's a truly historic Asian American community, and she'll be talking about Save Our Chinatown Committee.
Hey everyone, I'm Rosalind, and I'm joined by Eugene Moy, who's also a board member of the Save Our Chinatown Committee. And thank you for inviting us to share a bit about the work that we do. I would be remiss to not say that I am a proud Highlander. So I'm a graduate of UCR, did my undergraduate studies here, so I just wanted to say it's great to be back at UCR, and also with the Homegrown Heroes that are going to be celebrated next week. One of our founding board members, Dr. Deborah Wong, I believe, is among one of these heroes to be celebrated next week. So we're very proud of her and all of the work that she does. So I'm going to get into who the Save Our Chinatown Committee is. We're a nonprofit organization that was founded in 2008. Here are many of us and our supporters just outside of Riverside's historic Chinatown archaeological site, what we also refer to just as Riverside Chinatown. And I wanted to just ask the group, who has heard of Riverside Chinatown? Raise your hand. So maybe like a third of the people in the room. So just curious also, who lives in Riverside or the Inland Empire? Raise your hand. Okay, so some of the people who are not from this area are those who don't know that there's a Riverside Chinatown. And that's okay, because a lot of Riverside Chinatown's history has been lost over time. So I was just going to quickly touch on some of the Chinese American history in Riverside. And do you want to come up here with me? Because Jean is actually much more knowledgeable about the history, and Jean also is very involved in Los Angeles, Chinatown, Chinese Historical Society of Southern California, and a number of various organizations. So we just have a couple of slides on kind of some of the places that Riverside's Chinese pioneers were connected to. So these are images of the Jensen Alvarado Ranch, which is one of kind of an early site in Riverside. We believe that there were Chinese bricklayers who helped build this house. We also have been closely connected to the growth of the citrus industry in Riverside, like the Korean American community and Japanese American community. Chinese Americans were among the first Asian Americans who were working in the citrus industry and really helped build it up into kind of a major industry in the U.S. Also, Chinese were credited with really helping to develop a lot of infrastructure. So we often hear of Chinese and their contributions to building the Transcontinental Railroad, but there were also crews here locally in terms of our local railroads and other infrastructure projects as well. Chinese also worked in a number of local businesses. And here we have a picture of a Chinese laundryman. When we talk about the Chinese American community in Riverside, and the pioneer community in particular, we like to look at their contributions and a history of resilience. In 1885, the community was driven out of the downtown area due to a number of kind of factors that included some really high rent hikes from where they were living, but also what we believe to be some very racist ordinances that were passed during that time by the local government that really prohibited habitation or operation of wooden businesses in the downtown area, and really impacted some of our local Chinese business owners. A couple other moments in history that I wanted to point out were in Riverside, we did have anti-Chinese committees that organized locally to really discuss the problem of Chinese in our community and kind of how they were taking over jobs and taking over spaces. And there were people who were not happy with that. And do you want to talk a little bit?
Oh, sure. So the migration of Chinese to Riverside and the Inland Empire is just a part of the global migration of peoples from everywhere, whether it's from China, Japan, Korea, the Philippines, but also from many other lands around the world. So many came here for the opportunities that were available here. One thing that the early Chinese did do, though, that is pretty special, is that they constructed Chinatowns. And these were communities where there were entrepreneurs and there were residents, many who stayed for quite a while, many who unfortunately had to leave because of the Chinese Exclusion Acts, the alien land laws, and other obstacles that many other Asians faced in trying to establish themselves here. So our early Chinatowns in the Inland Empire, Riverside, Redlands, San Bernardino, Upland, Colton, Cucamonga, and so on, and Pomona too, all more or less disappeared. So it surprises many people to know that there were Chinatowns here. One of our goals here as a nonprofit organization is to help increase the awareness of the involvement and engagement of early Chinese in the local community. And by transference, you understand then that there were many other Asians who ended up becoming involved. So if the Chinese were kicked out of the packing houses, then they were replaced by other laborers, whether they were Korean or Japanese or Filipino or others or Indian. That is a part of the whole panorama of Riverside history.
Yeah, and I wanted to just share that the site that we've been actively engaged in trying to figure out a long-term preservation plan for has been designated as a historic landmark by all 4 levels of government, by the city, the county, the state, and the National Register. In the 1980s, in the mid-1980s, there was a partial excavation of the site, and that study unearthed a large amount of archaeological evidence of the community, considered to be the most intact early Chinatown site in the country is Riverside Chinatown. And many of those artifacts that were taken out of the ground are now housed or are now safeguarded, I suppose, whatever word you want to use, at the Riverside, the Museum of Riverside. And so from time to time, we see some of those artifacts on display. So we like to think of Riverside Chinatown as a site that has evolved. It no longer has buildings on the site. It's not what it looked like back in its heyday, but it's still an important heritage asset in our opinion. And that is why we have been so diligent and passionate about preserving this site for public use. So I wanted to, I don't know how much time I have, so.
Maybe
did you want-
yeah, let me add. So some people spent a month and a half digging at the archaeological site in the summer of 1985. My wife actually and I were among the people there. And it's hard to believe that that was almost 40 years ago. The purpose was to build a research and documentation foundation so that we would truly understand the significance of the site. That work was published in a 2-volume book that is in the library. I'm sorry I didn't haul it in because it weighs so much. But you can go to our website, saveourchinatown.org, and learn much more about the history of the site and the community. The individuals, the people who all had faces and personalities. So we tried to humanize the fact that this was truly a community of people, and there were some families too. So there were some, there's somehow a perception that Chinatowns were dominated by male workers, but at the same time, we also learned that there were also families who arrived here, who managed to come here and settle over the years. So that's part of the reason why some of us are still involved. After sweating in the sun 40 years ago, and then to the formation of the SaveOurChinatown.org, that we have continued our efforts to negotiate for the protection of the site. Maybe you can say
Yeah.
a word about that.
And I would just say from my personal perspective, I became involved in the effort when we founded the Save Our Chinatown Committee in 2008. My ability to be involved and contribute to historical scholarship, to community organizing, all of that I see as being enabled by people like Gene, his wife, and others who were getting involved decades before I came on the scene.
Yeah, and there were many
So-
others, non-Chinese, non-Asian, within the larger community, because people recognize that the diverse peoples who contributed to the growth of Riverside, some are still here. And so what we want to do is to recognize that underrepresented history.
Yeah, and I would just say for the young people who are in the room, there's no, there are ways that you can contribute if you're interested. We hold events throughout the year. We do a community cleanup. We lead a walking tour in downtown that's focused on Asian American history. We do a number of tabling at public events. And you can learn more about our organization if you go to our website, saveourchinatown.org. I just want to thank Dr. Chang
And the Young Oak Kim Center.
the Young Oak Kim Center for including us in the grant. We are going to be using that money to further our park planning efforts. As Ken mentioned, there is going to be a film that's going to be screened at the Civil Rights Institute. We are partnering with the Institute to show this film, and we will be there to provide some remarks about our local efforts to preserve Riverside Chinatown. So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you, Rosie and Jean. I envy Save Our Chinatown Committee because they have a place where they can hopefully dig up, archival materials. Whereas the Pachapa campsite is occupied by Southern California Edison Company. We have no control over it. It's a private property. So I don't know what to do, but I'm sure there are a lot of artifacts underneath. that site. Our final speaker is Professor Young-Suk Lee of California Baptist University, representing Dosan Anchangho Memorial Foundation of Americas.
Hello everyone. Thank you so much for today's time. My name is Young-Suk Lee, member of the Dosan Memorial Foundation. Dosan Memorial Foundation is a group of Korean American who are dedicated to preserve and sharing the legacy of Dosan Anchangho.
Is it on?
Need to raise it a little bit.
Huh?
Yes.
I can say it louder.
Yeah. It was off.
Okay. So we do it. I'm a member of the Dosan Memorial Foundation of Americas. We're a group of Korean Americans who are dedicated to preserve and sharing the legacy of Dosan Anchangho, especially his influences and accomplishments in the United States. I believe most of you who are here is already familiar with who is Dosan Anchangho, but I prepare a short video to introduce him and our foundation.
세계 각 나라의 사람들이 모여 살고 있는 미국. 다양한 인종과 문화가 문제되었던 이곳 미국 리버사이드시에 인류 역사를 빛낸 세계 각 나라의 사람들이 모여 살고 있는 미국. 다양한 인종과 문화가 문제되었던 이곳 미국 리버사이드시에 인류 역사를 빛낸 몇몇 이들의 동상이 세워져 있다. 그중 시청 광장앞 마틴 루터킹 목사를 마주보고 서 있는 도산 안창호 선생의 동상. 미국 땅의 외국인으로서 최초로 세워진 도산 선생의 동상이 이곳에 자리하게 된 건 그분의 업적과 정신을 기리고자 하는 해외 동포들의 뜨거운 성원과 그의 불씨로 일어난 미주 도산기념 사업회가 있었다.
99년에 동산을 갖다가 이제 세운 그 프로젝트가 시작이 됐죠. 그러니까 이제 우리가 모금을 해가지고 그때 그 모금하는 것도 지가 교회는 다 돌아다녔어요. 순수한 안도 모시고 김대중 대통령 계실 때 청와대에 들어가서 얘기를 대통령한테 했더니 그 봉처에서 10만 불을 대통령이 개척했다고. 그래가지고 뭐 거두니까 한 70만 불 거뒀어요. 그래서 우리 동포사회에서 신뢰를 많이 받았죠. 예.
나라를 잃은 초라한 백성의 신분으로 미국에서 최초의 한인 이민 역사를 썼던 도산 선생의 삶이 한인뿐 아닌 타민족에게까지 감동을 주는 이유는 무엇일까?
Dosan Anchangho was a truly inspirational leader. He loved his country. Dosan lived by 4 main principles: seek the truth, act upon the truth, be loyal and trustworthy, and be courageous to uphold the truth.
오렌지 하나를 따는 것도 나라를 사랑하는 길이라고 가르치고 스스로 모범을 보였던 도산 안창호. 도산 선생은 리버사이드를 중심으로 최초의 한인촌을 형성하고 동포를 결집시켜 협동정신과 책임의식을 가르치며 교포들의 의식을 깨우고 마음을 한 곳으로 모으는 일에 힘을 다하였다. 선생을 중심으로 뭉친 교포들은 고된 현실 속에서도 독립운동 자금을 지원하였고 낯선 남의 땅에서 그저 이방인이 아닌 개척자로 주인의식을 갖고 존경받는 한인 사회를 세워갔다. 그러기에 그들은 고단한 이민 생활에도 당당했고 굳건할 수 있었다.
안창호 선생의 이민사회에서의 영향력과 지도력은 탁월했습니다. 남의 나라에서 하루하루 생계를 걱정하며 살던 교포들이 도산 선생의 리더십 아래 하나가 되어서 독립운동 자금을 지원하고 또한 선생의 가르침에 따라 정직과 성실로 이민생활을 개척해 나갔다는 거죠. 과거와 비교할 수 없을 정도로 커진 지금의 미주 한인 사회에 꼭 필요한 가치라고 생각합니다. 특별히 도산 선생의 애기에타의 정신, 즉 사랑과 나눔의 인류의 정신은 미래 21세기 미주 한인 사회를 건강히 세워갈 지표가 될 거라고 믿습니다. 이를 위해 미주 도산 기념사업회는 도산 선생의 숭고한 뜻과 이상을 기리고 미주 동포 및 한민족의 뿌리 교육에 이바지하고자 1999년 출범하여 지금까지 다양한 사업을 이어가고 있습니다.
Stop here. Just like the other three groups who joined today, I think we feel the responsibility to share and hands-on this legacy to our next generations. To the first generation Korean American or Koreans, Dosan Anchamo is a very well-known person. However, many of the younger generation of Korean American is not aware of who he is. Even the fact that he lived here in Riverside. Personally, my family came to the United States 30 years ago, and we settled in the city of Corona, which is very close from here. But I never knew Dosan was living where I was lived until I joined the Dosan Memorial Foundations. So I'm very thankful to the Dosan Memorial Foundation, also Professor Chang, on their works to recognizing and presenting and educating other Korean Americans about this history, part of the United States history. Dosan Memorial Foundation is very family-like, very close-knit group of people. Everyone is very welcome to join us. We are dedicated to raising the awareness of the Dosan's teaching. Some of our past activity include the art contest from K-12, seminars, conference in both United States and Korea. Also the annual celebration of Dosan Anchamo Day on November 9th, which is also officially recognized by the California legislatures. Currently, one of our biggest initiatives is working with the city of Riverside to establish the Dosan Memorial Center. So, City of Riverside is working with the Dosan Memorial Foundation to establish this memorial center. So the city provides about 10 acres of the lot next to the Citrus State Park, which is also very close from here. This is the current location of the proposed building site. Very nice places overlooking the Citrus Park. Historical meaning of the Citrus Park is where the Dosan came to the United States. He was working as a citrus picker, orange pickers. So that's a very meaningful place for us to build this memorial center. We are trying to achieve three main goals by having this memorial center. First one is, of course, a memorial museum to preserve and presenting the legacy of Dosan Anchamo. For that, we will definitely have the exhibition spaces, hopefully equipped with the very ID, VR, AR places as well. However, we don't want this to be the only place for the Korean Americans, but we want to be this place to be our cultural and community hub in Riverside, where all the different group of the community came together and celebrate our heritages. Lastly, we also hope to, not sure, but have some kind of performing spaces. And due to the fact this is very nice, location overlooking the lake and the citrus park, we want to develop this as a memorial park to be an outdoor destination for the community. Lastly, I want to share, for the last 2 years, I've been teaching the Dosan Architecture studios at the CDU for the senior year architecture student. So each student, we are having this topic, proposed Dosan Memorial Center to design for their projects. For 24 students over the 2 semesters they joined, and each one of those presented their unique design for these proposed projects. It was very unique. These are some of the students' work. It was a very unique experience to teach about Dosan, and eventually I also learned that the Dosan is not only the history of Korea, but it's also the history of the United States, as well as the history of the Riverside. All of the students, they received him very respectfully and really admired who he is, what he has done. Was really very example for our students as well. So I'm very honored to have and present some of this work, some of the works. So our vision for the Dosan Memorial Center is not just for the Korean American, but for the people from all cultural backgrounds. We are committed to preserving Dosan's fearless leadership and pioneering spirit, with the hope of inspiring future generations to contribute to our community and society. On the behalf of the Dosan Memorial Foundation, I also want to express our deep gratitude to Professor Chang and the Yomo Kim Center to be part of this program and part of this grant. Before I finish, I want to introduce one more event that we are hosting. It's a Dosan musical, which will perform in LA Racial Ibel Theater in November 9th and November 10th. This is the first time they are performing this musical, and I watched this already twice. Highly recommend. So professional and really inspiring musical piece that I really want to recommend everyone to come and join us. Thank you so much.